Hello, the Oldenburg Palace. As always, I start with a quick recap because I don't expect you to remember everything, and why would you need to do that? Plus, some details always seem to disappear from our memory, which is fine. This is located in the so-called German colony of Tbilisi, clearly, and this neo-Gothic style mansion. It was built by a German architect, Paul Stern, and it's, as I said, way more than just a house that belonged to an Oldenburg family related to the Romanovs. No, actually, this is a museum of Georgian music, cinema, theater, and choreography. So I'm using this opportunity to, well, kind of kill many birds with just one stone, showing you a beautiful house. It's the first, by the way, project, kind of a pilot project of the restoration, which gave a kickstart to the restoration of multiple other listed buildings in the city. We're talking here early 2000s. Then I also show you and tell you the story of the Oldenburg family, which we will focus largely in the next tour. I promise, because we're finally going to be we'll be reaching the room where we will see a lot of personal items of the Oldenburgs and more portraits. So this is the room where it will make more sense to talk about their life story and their love story. Well, and also we talk about Georgian theater, music, cinema, and choreography because this is a museum which combines kind of everything. So Paul Stern, we spoke a lot about this architect when we walked in this German colony. He built a lot of beautiful buildings in the city. So speaking of the Oldenburg, so Grand Duke Constantine of Oldenburg, who married the Georgian Countess Agrippina, originally Japarise, and when she married Constantine, she became Agrippina von Zornikau, also the Countess. And this house wasn't built for them, but it was rebuilt to their design. From the interiors were redesigned, so to speak. And they didn't really live in this building much. They would normally they would be based in St. Petersburg, but since Grand Duke Constantine, which I spoke about last time, he was in charge of the development projects in the healthcare and several other fields in the Caucasus. They would be quite frequent in the Caucasus in general, and they would be staying in this house whenever they visited Tbilisi. But they also had real estate in other areas of Georgia. I love this photo a lot. This is the photo from 1916, and as you can see, the palace no longer belonged to them. It says here at the entrance, Vysotsky Tea Company. This Vysotsky Tea Company, I'm not entirely sure whether it was the office or it was just a big tea shop, but what this photo can tell us is that this palace was not taken from the Oldenburgs after the revolution. We already spoke about the how the revolution in Russia was different from the revolution in Georgia. And also, as you can see from the right hand side, there is no other building next to it. So the building that we can see nowadays, the pink one with stripes, that's clearly an extension from the Soviet times. So you see also in the blueprints, you don't see this building at all because it's something from a later period. So we're talking here 1920s, 1930s, and that was an orphanage. Obviously, during the Soviet times, the this palace did not belong to the Oldenburgs, of course. Yeah, and the museum moved in here way later, already after the restoration. We are on the second floor now. The recording of the previous episode you can find on my YouTube channel, or you can access it from my website. And we are in the art gallery. The Oldenburgs amassed quite a great collection of artworks of different kinds. And also, as you know, one of the core, well, let's see, the core The collection is also the items from the collection of the private collection of the Dadiani family. And here are the artworks that were made by, so the last artist we spoke about. I'm going to recap him a little bit because he's quite an interesting character and a prominent Georgian artist of late 19th century, early 20th century, Grigori Gigo Gabashvili, who specialized in the Caucasus and Middle Eastern vibes, and he traveled across the Middle East, across Georgia, just painting the sceneries, still lives, and the people, their costumes with the great detail to the everyday life and the outfits of the people, the lifestyle of different peoples of these areas, and also he was a professional artist. He studied in Europe. After he graduated from the Academy of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, he went to Germany and he spent there quite a while. Obviously, when he returned to Georgia, we're talking here 18, end of 1890s, he had become the the first professional artist of Georgia to have been given the permission to open his, well, no, it's not like a permission, but he was the first artist who had his private exhibition in uh, in uh, in Tbilisi. And later on in the 19 in the during the First World War times, already after the revolution in Russia, uh, when Georgia declared its independence from the Russian Empire, it was the time when a lot of British contingent was in the country, and in general, a lot of international contingent. They came to Batumi first and foremost, by sea, by the Black Sea, and from Batumi, a lot of international contingent came to Tbilisi. There were a lot of politicians. Among them was Charles Richard Crane, who came to Georgia firstly for philanthropic reasons, to to invest, to donate Georgia and its talented people. He was an Arabist, by the way, and he made a lot of friends, a lot of connections, including the connection uh, with Gabashvili. He purchased the author's copy of the work that was originally made in 1890s, and well, he purchased it from Gabashvili. Later on in 2006, so about a century later, this artwork was sold at $1.360 million. Well, at Christie's. So it's more than $1 million, just incredible, right? So, but that's also because it was all this time, it was in the private collection of Charles Crane, who was a very interesting character himself. That's played a big role, I would say, in the way the world started looking after the First World War, including the Middle East, including the Caucasus, and he admired Georgia and Georgian strategy to become independent and the Georgian efforts on their way to become a democratic republic. Well, but as you know, that didn't last long because the Bolsheviks eventually invaded in 1921. But that's a different story. So let's focus on the museum. Today, we're talking mostly about movies and about art. And next time we're focusing on the life and love story of the Oldenburgs. I'm basically going with the museum, the way the museum wants us to want the story to unfold. And next time, I promise I will be sharing with you the city legends also that you can hear in connection with this house. And in the previous episode, we spoke about several modern theater artists. So let's talk a little bit about the actors. So one of the portraits that kind of caught my eye was the portrait of Tasso or Anastasia Abashidze. She was a prominent Georgian actress, and she was one of the first and most popular actresses of the black and white silent movies, even in Georgia. So first, all the movies were silent, and then and she happened to be the one who was, as you know, the actors in of the silent movies weren't exactly good. Well, I mean, not all of them were exactly as good when the new movies already had the sound. So Tasobashide was very different in this regard. He was equally successful in silent and the sound movies, and you can see she had the posture, right? She has something noble in her face. So she actually indeed came from the noble family, and well, it was not really an I would say uh, kind of she wasn't a princess or a countess, but the Abashidze is an old dynasty in Georgia. There are a lot of famous representatives of the Abashidze dynasty. Also, there are people that just happen to have the same names, but they are not related. That's a different story. This is the thing that really um, makes things complicated when you want to learn about Georgia. These things you really need to know, and that takes a lot of time, to dig whether these people are related or not when it's necessary. The portrait was made by Varian Sidamon Aristavi. That was a prominent artist of the 1920s and 1930s. He did a lot of, since it's a museum of also theater art, so most of the artists that you can see in this museum, their artworks, they are mostly related to the theater or to the cinema. So Valeriana Restavi did a lot of artworks for the theater and also for early movies, 1930s as well. And in 1920s, exactly, this is when the first Georgian movies started to be released. And in 1930s, the Georgian film studio opened little by little, gradually. And by the way, the film studio is located not really far from where the palace is nowadays. And that's what Tasso Bashidze looked in her teens. That's how she started. I mean, that face, the eyes, well, she clearly had the spark. So for some reason, I, I felt like talking about her. And she was versatile. She was equally good, as I said, silent and sound movies, but also different characters, from young kids to elderly ladies. And no wonder she was really, really well loved by the people. And this is her wearing male's costume. So she also was very good at playing male characters, which was not a problem in the Georgian theater, by the way. Or that. I'm not sure exactly what it was. Also, she played in theater. It wasn't her main. I would say she didn't specialize in theater, but she was also good on stage. So I would say this is quite unusual. And she played till the very, very advanced age. Okay, so I was thinking to, I don't know, maybe at some point I will ask Misha to actually come up with a tour of the Georgian movies, because there are some movies that are absolute masterpieces. And some movies, since we've done so many tours of Tbilisi, they can show you what the city looked like 100 years ago, or 70 years ago. So I thought to myself that if you ask a Georgian, okay, maybe, okay, I'm not sure if, let's say, if we ask someone in their 20s, they will necessarily remember the Sobashidze, but people in their 50s and even 40s, they probably will. And her main role, for sure, the highlight of her career, which was a very long, long, long career, that it went over 50 years, by the way, uh, because she started playing when she was like really in her early teens. So the Sobashidze played in the movie called Hanuma. And that's the story, basically, of how Count Levan Panchashvili wanted to get married. And he asked the matchmakers for their services. And there were two. There were Hanuma and Ketobe. So this is just the kind of the story and how the conflict revolved, how the two matchmakers competed over the attention, and supplied the candidates, for the for Panchashvili. But it's not about that. It's about Tbilisi. So originally we're talking about the film from 1920s. However, the uh, mm, the novel Hanuma was so popular that there were several more films created later on. And I will show you first the film where Tasso Bashidze is playing, and you will see her, but also you will see the city. I struggled with the subtitles, to be honest, and because the film originally is in Georgian with the Russian subtitles, and then I try to provide as accurately as possible the English subtitles. So it's like a subtitle and another caption added to it. So, but again, in this particular story, in the black and white movie is about the Tbilisi from 1920s, which is a very interesting period. And you will see some streets that are familiar to you for sure if you watch. I mean, if you watch my tours, you will probably recognize at least the vibe. You can definitely say, oh yeah, that's Tbilisi. That's the old city. Oh, that's the Rustaveli Avenue, which was called Galavinsky Avenue back then, by the way, named after one of the viceroys of the Romanovs. This is like very, very early 1920s, so before the renaming, before the Bolsheviks even came. Okay, yeah, so let's get started, and then I will show you a movie of a later period, of the late Soviet period, and I will explain why I'm showing you that. So you should be able to have the sound, it should be good. Second.
Caves. Dakhla gulma Golovinskis prospektisაკენ გამოუწია.
I like it how a sword has a separate carriage. So you see George going along the Golovinsky Avenue, the main avenue, going down the main avenue, drinking wine from the horns, enjoying the life. That's, by the way, the palace of the Viceroy Romanov on the Golovinsky Avenue, which is, as I said now, Romanov Avenue. Sorry, the Rustaveli Avenue. That's very recognizable. These buildings are still there. It's just one of the streets that takes you to the Rustaveli Avenue, and you see the gate. So this is the gate that originally was for the carriages, and these gates are still there, by the way. Well, they're not the wooden ones, but the buildings are still there.
და მოგახსენოთ, რომ პოლიციელებთან ურთიერთობის ერთობ ორიგინალური მეთოდი ჰქონდა თავად ლევან ფანტიაშვილს. ლაყმობითა და ფიცი მტკიცით თავს არა მივიდა თუ არა, ყურები გამოუჭედა თავადსა და ქალბატონ თეკლეს. ერთი ქოთქოთი ატეხა. ისეთ ქალს შეგთავ, ისეთ ქალს.
So what's happening here is that the Bantiashvili and his sister Tekla, they have a visitor. So the one of the two matchmakers, and this is exactly Tasabashidze. So she is kind of the antagonist. So she's kind of the bad matchmaker, and she's trying to promote the candidate that she has for the count, and she's basically going out of her way to make them want to see that girl. And she's lying all the time. But the Sabashidze, well, you can see she has this character, really interesting one.
ხონთ ქარს შეშურდებაო.
But of course, it's also about looking at the costumes, looking at how people lived back then.
მერე საიდანღაც მზითების ნუსხა დააძრო. აი ესაო, ისაო.
And the long list that she has, like the scroll, that's the scroll of the dowry that the girl has with her. That was important, obviously, all the dowry.
იქ მამულებიო, აქ დუქნებიო, დროშკებიო, ეტლებიო, 2000 მანეთი ნაღდი ფულიო. თანაც ისეთი ტურფა არიო, ისეთი მშვენიერი, ისეთი ლამაზი თვალები აქვსო, ისეთი წამწამებიო. მოკლედ სულ ისეთსა და ასეც გაიძახოდა. თავადი და მისი და თეკლე ერთობ გაახარა ამ ამბავმა.
So and Pentesh really got so excited about after having seen this long list of the dowry that he really wants to see the girl. I'm not going to tell you what happened next, but I'm going to show you also a movie filmed in Leningrad, which is in St. Petersburg, end of 1970s. And that was kind of a theater play filmed for a movie. And I just want you to see one of the scenes of the city, the dance, the vibe. It's if you want to see what Tbilisi looked like back in the day, so these films are really one of the best. And they also have good music that was composed by the Georgian composers, by the way. And well, since Georgia was part of the Soviet Union, that's totally okay that the Georgian composers, Georgian film directors and actors, they collaborated together and worked for Lend Film Studio, which was based in Leningrad. So Khanuma is, by the way, this play is still very popular in Russian theaters. It's like it's one of the must-sees for sure. Even the captions, everything here is interesting. So I'm keeping all this here. And I'm sure you will recognize the artworks, which we are going to talk about later on as well. So these are the artworks by the one and only Nikopi Rasmanishvili. And the Hanuma, it's originally the play written by Tagareli, the Georgian playwright. Georgy Tostanogov is the famous, outstanding Russian director who spent quite a lot of time in Tbilisi in general, especially during the evacuation. The composer Gergancelli is one of the best 20th century composers in the Soviet Union and beyond, by the way.
Только я глаза закрою, предо мною ты встаешь. Только я глаза открою, над ресницами плывешь. Поезжай-ка, фартачалый, посмотри, каков я есть. Как ударим мы в цимбалы, посмотри, каков я есть. Тамада в дыму табачном, посмотри, каков я есть. Молодец в бою кулачном, посмотри, каков я есть. Как посмотришь, так полюбишь, как полюбишь, подойдешь. Только я глаза закрою, предо мною ты встаешь. Только я глаза открою, над ресницами плывешь.
So as I said, this was the entering scene of the second act of the play that was filmed to be shown on the television, like a teleplay, or what you call it. I'm not sure even. So that was just to kind of have the feeling of Tbilisi of the times back then. And as I said, the artwork, a lot of artwork was used from the one and only Nicole Pirosmanishvili. And I thought that showing you Hanuman was also a very logical thing to do, because I can tell you a little bit more about Nicole Pirosmanishvili himself. Because among all these artworks and also porcelain and all this, I'm not even sure what this is, a lot of applied art object and even some Wedgwood. I We can focus on the artwork collection itself. And I thought to myself when I was there for the first time, I thought to myself, wow, there are so many beautiful artworks, and I wonder if there is money there. And yes, it also happens that yes, there is one work by Nika Pirosmanishvili in this museum as well. I am not going into a lot of details here because I have a separate tour, actually two tours of Nika Pirosmani. But the story of this museum wouldn't be complete without Pirosmani. And whenever I have a chance, I promote this artist because it was so unique, absolutely authentic, absolutely self-taught artist with a very sad story. But he kind of was one of the first artists that became famous also abroad and represented Georgia and got a lot of Europeans interested in what actually Georgia was. And many people still don't know what Georgia is about. I know that. So one of my missions also while I'm in Georgia, I know it's all temporarily, but it's been almost 2 years now already. So we'll see how it goes. I'm not relying on anything and nothing is guaranteed. I'm not taking anything for granted. So, but one of my goals is, well, just to let the world know what Georgia is. And one of the means to do that is definitely through art. So Nico Pirosmani, well, I think what's written there in some so sad because even in the explications in the museum, it says Nikolai Rasmanishvili was the primitive artist of 20th century Georgia. Well, primitive is the word, yes, so he definitely worked with the primitivism style, but there's nothing really primitive in his work. He was so absolutely um, absolute gem. So his works you can easily recognize and say the difference between Pirasmani and anyone else. He never studied art anywhere. He just painted the way he could, the way he saw it. And in most cases, he was so poor that he didn't even have a canvas. And this is how he just earned for a living. He basically created the paintings, the artwork for the taverns. They're called duhan in Georgia. So the taverns, and they would in most cases he wouldn't even be paid with money. He would be paid with food. He would be provided a place to stay, and well, and money too, of course. So, and his parents passed away when he was quite young, and he came to Tbilisi, originally from the village. And it looks like he never really completely left the village because a lot of his artworks were still about animals, still about the village life, about nature. And since he stayed in Tbilisi, he also did a lot of artwork about the everyday life. But that's also why his works are so interesting because they let you know what it was like. And I like all these figs in the market, the nuts, the apples, and I think that this vendor is selling that lady the truchella, which is very well. There's nuts on the string. Well, also he painted just people, the visitors of the dukhans or the owners of those taverns. And these artworks are so recognizable, especially because of this black background. That's because in many cases, since he didn't really have any canvas, he would paint on kind of a vinyl tablecloth, something like that. It's kind of let me find a better word. It just slipped my mind completely. Just a second. Kind of a very special black material, kind of an oilcloth. Well, it's not exactly plastic. Plastic was not really used back then, so I was struggling to find a better word. It's kind of an oilcloth, something like that. So the and he would he painted on that, and that's why his colors looked so intense and so pure. And this is how much he was able to add the light due to that contrast. And it's not because he tried to do this, because he just didn't have any other means to do well, just that. Or he could paint on wood or simply on the walls, and that's why many of his artworks are basically gone because they were just on the walls of the taverns. And there are still quite a lot of them you can find in different museums in Georgia and also in private collections. Well, this one is one of my favorites for sure, because again, here you see all the delicacies that you can find in Georgia. Clearly, this is an ad for one of the vendors in the Georgian market. So pears, peaches, fish, grapes, meat, wine. I mean, whatever. And yeah, the nature. So that's this wolf is one of the iconic works. That's because again, it's just the oilcloth, the black oilcloth, and it's mostly just black, white, and the blue that he used for this. A different and well, obviously all this gray shades, just several colors, primitive art, but I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do it this way, right? So it's not just the primitivism; it's way more than that. It's way more than that. And yes, the sites of Tbilisi and also some other areas where he was from, also the people. for example, this is the portrait of the dvornik, of the street sweeper that he actually lived next to him. And there is a film. You wouldn't be surprised to know that there is actually a film about Niko Pirosmani. It's called Pirosmani. It was filmed in also I think 1970s. And I'm going just to show you a very short episode. So Niko Pirosmani wandered from one place to another. He never really had a permanent place to stay. Well, so in some places he would be staying for several months, but mostly he was just um, cruising from one tavern to another. Sometimes, taverns would let him stay for the night, or there would be a room, or there was a kind of an inn upstairs. So whenever he could, he would be staying. Well, there are captions there, but I will explain also for those who have issues seeing the captions if you're watching from a small screen or any other reason. So one of the owners of the tavern, the Duhan, is offering Pirosmani to stay with him and work for him on a permanent basis. And he's offered very good conditions. And basically Pirosmani says that he doesn't want to be chained. Okay, let's watch this very short episode.
Здравствуй. Нико, хватит тебя по улицам шататься. Иди ко мне в услужение. Я тебе буду платить, дам комнату, одежду. Раз в неделю можешь в баню сходить. Деньги в копилку клади. Кончишь работу, в свободное время рисуй сколько хочешь, я не возражаю. Не могу я быть в кандалах голо.
А ну покажи, что у тебя получилось.
And yes, if you remember, a week ago, we did a number of tours in the market tours. And on one of those tours, we visited the Tatsminda mountain on top of Tatsminda market on top of the mountain. And we took the funicular downstairs. So the same funicular line was actually painted by Pirosmani. And I also showed you the lower station pavilion. So the original pavilion looked like that. So Pirosmani was quite accurate as what they say. Well, in a way, at least. And how was Pirosmani discovered? So I briefly will walk you through that. And then we continue. So in 1910s, the group of young artists came to Tbilisi. Mihaela Dentu, she was a Russian-French artist, and the two brothers, Kirill and Ilyas Danevich. They were originally of Polish descent, but they were born in Tbilisi because there were a lot of Polish people living in Tbilisi. They were descendants of the Polish exiles who were exiled from Poland for their opposition to the Romanovs, were the fighters for the Polish independence from the Russian Empire, and that's why many were exiled to the outskirts of the empire. And at that point, 19th century, Georgia was the outskirts of the empire. So that's how a lot of Polish people are still living in Georgia because of that. And that's why the Catholic presence is pretty big in Georgia because of the descendants of the Polish people. So the Ilyas Danevich and the Kirill Danevich, they started in France. They lived in St. Petersburg, and they came to Tbilisi. And in one of the taverns, they actually, they noticed the works of Pirosmani, and it took them a while, but they managed to find him. So Kirill Danevich eventually stayed in the Soviet Union after the revolution. He stayed in Georgia, and then he stayed in Georgia after the Bolsheviks invaded. Ilyas Danevich, however, left, and he went to Paris. In Paris he became quite a big artist. Kirill Danevich became quite a big artist in Georgia. Obviously, less known, not known really outside of the Soviet Union, but quite respected in the Soviet Union and in Georgia. But Ilyas Danevich became, I would say, almost the well, international level artist, so to speak. He became one of the so to speak, Paris sweethearts of the Paris. One of the one of this how shall I say? Maybe even for a short time, sex symbols of Paris at that time. And when he while they were still staying in Tbilisi, they found Pirosmani, and they tried to promote Pirosmani as much as possible in St. Petersburg. And later on, when Danevich left for Europe, he also tried to promote Pirosmani art in Europe as well. And by the way, this is young Ilyas Danevich, so they came as a young gentleman, basically. And Pirosmani made a portrait of Ilyas Danevich, which I think is very accurate. These are the two brothers in Tbilisi. You see elegant, educated, talented. And by the way, we passed by the house where they were staying while in Tbilisi. There's an interesting story, which I'll probably share on one of the tours, but at this point, we're focusing just on the Danevich brothers. So they were the three good friends. Eventually, Ilyas Danevich, as I said, became a very popular artist of France back then. And he, among other things that he did, he was an avant-garde artist, created the textiles, the textile designs for Chanel and for her late 1920s collections. So that skirt, by the way, also design of Ilyas Danevich. And he became a very good friend with Pablo Picasso. They were like really, really best buddies. I think one of the photos the photo is pretty much, I would say, it sums up what kind of friendship they had. So Pablo Picasso was doing his hair, and Danevich never ceased talking about Pablo Picasso, talking about Pirosmani, and Pablo Picasso was so impressed by the Pirosmani story that he even created this sketch. This is Pablo Picasso painting a Pirosmani. It's just a sketch, obviously, not really a big deal, but I'm sure Nico Pirosmani would have been flattered had he found out that Pablo Picasso, one of the biggest artists of the 20th century, was amazed by his works. But the sad story is that Pirosmani was in love with a French artist that came to Tbilisi on a tour, Margarita de Sèvres. Well, she was just a French actress, and he just completely fell in love with her. He saw her on stage maybe a couple of times, fell completely in love, painted this artwork, and that was it. Now there are a lot of legends also around that story, as if he had spent all the money he had to buy the flowers, and he put the flowers under the windows, under the balcony of the hotel she was staying. And there are multiple places around the city where the story might have happened, but Margarita left. Nico Pirosmani was absolutely inconsolable, and shortly after that he fell ill, and then he at some point was taken to the hospital. At hospital, he passed away and nobody even knows where he's buried. And way later in 1960s, Margarita de Sever, who never actually became a famous actress, she was invited to an exhibition in the Louvre Museum to see her portrait by Pirosmani. So Pirosmani had his personal exhibition in Paris, in Louvre, in the Louvre Museum. And this is her, this woman wearing a black coat. This is Margarita de Sever next to her portrait. That's quite a story, I would say. So these type of stories I cannot but share with you. So and we're going to wrap it up quite shortly because we still need to prepare for the upcoming tour, which is in 8 minutes from now. And we are at the basically a dining room of the Oldenburg family. So Grand Duke Constantine and Agrippina. We are now in the memorial part. Well, okay, as I said, the place was never really a museum before. It was not a museum of the Oldenburg family, but there are a lot of items that were brought from the Dadiani collection. So it's not exactly not exactly the memorial, but this is the recreation with the contemporary furniture and furnishing in general. And we have a portrait of Agrippina herself exactly over there. And this is exactly how next time we're going to start with the story of how that was actually possible for a Grand Duke from St. Petersburg and originally from Germany and Denmark, how they met and why there are so many legends about their family life, about their marriage, and why there were so many rumors and dirty stories around their marriage even back then, and why they still stick around. Okay, so let's have a short Q&A before I switch to the next door, which is the Fabergé Museum. So the chat is open. Let me know if you have any questions. Plus, I decided to talk about Pirosmani again because the tour I did about him was more than a year ago. So maybe at some point I should do the tour again and also update it because I have some information to update it with. So we'll see. And I love Pirosmani work so much myself, and I believe he was absolutely unique in so many different senses. Let me know if you have any questions, and in the meantime, I will be sharing some links. Well, for the Ronnie, by the way, thank you so much for the tips. I just didn't have a chance to to say anything to reply. What a fascinating history you give regarding the films. Yes, Ruth. So, it was basically, I'm jumping at any opportunity to show you more, to tell you more. And on my tours, on my live walks in Tbilisi, I just never really have the time to bring this up. So I thought, if not tonight, when else can I give you those stories? So that's why I'm using every chance that I have. And since it's the Museum of Georgian Culture, why would I just talk about the older books when it's way more than that? It's just several centuries of Georgian culture history, which I can share with you through this, I would say, visible visual means. So I think that's just something I absolutely have to do. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you so much. Okay, so I will see you shortly in the Fabergé Museum in 5 minutes from now. And that's going to be the last tour for tonight, for tomorrow, and on Tuesday, December 30th. If you can, please join us for our short family-style, home-style concert next to our teeny tiny Christmas tree and the small Georgian Christmas tree called Chichilaki. It's going to be some music, holiday songs, some weird Russian salads. I won't be cooking that. We'll just buy them, but I can't handle doing so much cooking in December. So thank you so much for joining. You're all invited. The links are all there on the website. The recording will be provided shortly as well of this tour. And also, I'm hoping that at some point I will be able to, or Misha will be able to do the tour about the Georgian cinema because, well, movies and well, there's a lot really to talk about in this regards. Holodets, yes, exactly. Yeah, yes, that meat jelly thing is called holodets. I'll try to get that as well. Yeah, it's gotta be. Yeah, I know. Thank you so much, everyone. I really have to go. I will see you soon on the Fabergé tour. Bye bye. I will share the recording shortly.